Good morning. Thank you, members of the committee, for the chance to testify here today. In 2023, the legislature and the governor took an important step towards improving literacy in the state of Wisconsin, as we've discussed with the passage of Act 20. And we think it's time to bring a similar level of urgency and practicality to math with this important legislation. We've already discussed a lot of the statistics, the dire statistics and the racial achievement gap and the sort of lower proficiency that we're seeing across the board, so I won't go through all those again. I think a couple things to note is, we have 128 districts in the state that even after DPI has lowered the proficiency standards in math this year, that are under 50% proficiency in math overall. So we're still seeing a large number of districts where there is this sort of broad scale problem that we're discussing today. But beyond those statistics are fundamental gaps in what's called numeracy. And we've already kind of discussed it, but this is the basic understanding of numbers, place value, and arithmetic that children need to understand and learn math. Numeracy is to math what literacy is to reading, essentially. It's not just about problem solving and equations, it's about applying math in everyday life, comparing prices, managing money, or understanding data. When students develop numeracy early, they're much more likely to succeed later in school, graduate, and move into high-demand, high-paying careers. An important distinction between literacy and numeracy reforms is in the topic of curriculum, and we've sort of gone through discussing that as well earlier today. But while literacy focuses on the implementation of specific type of curricula, numeracy is more focused on the learning of basic concepts and ensuring that students have sufficient understanding of these numeracy concepts overall. Unfortunately, too many Wisconsin students are missing out on those building blocks. On the most recent NAEP in 2024, 1/3 of Wisconsin fourth graders couldn't even tell even from odd numbers, and nearly half of eighth graders couldn't identify an octagon. These are not the highest bar that we're trying to achieve, right? These are the basic steps that we want to see improvement on. And again, these are these foundational skills. That's why we think this bill is important. The bill requires regular tracking and intervention for students who are falling behind, which are key components of improving math outcomes. This bill also requires regular numeracy screenings, as has been discussed, for students identified as at risk and not meeting grade level expectations, and the school must provide quality tutoring. I think that that is an important component of this bill. It's a little bit, folks are questioning whether this is a sufficient enough intervention. There is wisdom in starting with a little bit of a lighter hand, because we're not quite as bad in math as we are in the reading. It's still an urgent problem, but we're not as far behind as we are there. And as was mentioned earlier, there are some districts that are doing quite a good job here. So this isn't just about test scores, it's about preparing Wisconsin's future workforce. Research has found that individuals with strong numeracy skills earn 30% more on average in the workforce. And closer to home, a 2023 WMC survey found that 73% of employers say high school graduates are unprepared for the workforce, and 56% struggle with reading or math. A recent study by the Urban Institute even found that strong math skills are a better predictor of landing in-demand careers than reading gains or even health factors. And there was some discussion earlier about Alabama, and the reality is, as the representative brought up, that Alabama is still below in math relative to Wisconsin. But if we'd had this conversation in reading, a decade ago, we would have said, well, why are we looking at Mississippi? Mississippi's behind Wisconsin in reading. Now we've flipped. Now Mississippi in fourth grade is actually ahead of Wisconsin. So I think, we're trying to do the clarion call a little earlier here so that we can show improvement before we end up in that situation that we find ourselves in reading. So by adopting this numeracy bill, Wisconsin give every child the mathematical foundation they need to thrive in school, in the workforce, and in everyday life. This is the science of numeracy, like the science of math, and it's clear what's needed now is the leadership to put this into practice. And thank you very much. I'll entertain any questions.
Okay, thank you.